Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Thursday edition of the show, joined by John McMullen, Eagles insider, Eagles beat reporter. I'm your host, Zander, Krause. Thanks for being here. Everybody, just 5 days away from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp. Johnny Mac, we have turned the corner, brother. We are right there. How you doing on this Thursday morning?
Doing well, yeah. We even got a schedule, so you can tell it's getting real. And yeah, they'll be on the practice field 10 a.m. Wednesday morning. Nick Sirianni's going to be talking at 9:30 before practice, as his typical want is in training camp. Felt early on he thought about that and wanted to get off the field as quickly as possible to get in and watch the film of practice. So he likes talking before practice. We as media people would probably like him to talk after practice, because then he can ask him about what happened, if there's injuries, but you take what you can get. So similar to last year's, and we'll see as far as the time and how much time they spend on the field. I think it's going to be a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to be crazy change from what you've seen in recent seasons.
Yeah, so you heard Johnny Mac say the time. So just for all of our listening audience and all of our loyal viewers who are here every morning, stay tuned. There might be a little bit of a change in the Birds 365 schedule. We want to continue to give you guys 2 hours of Eagles talk a day. So, with the schedule being so early for training camp and for the heat, we might change around a little bit when Birds 365 airs. So we will keep you posted exactly on when that is. Thank you all again for being here, for being so loyal to the show. We promise to provide you with that 2 hours each day. So that's what we will do for you guys. Johnny Mac, what are you thinking? Like 75 minutes, 80 minutes, 90 minutes? Last year it was 55 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have those 60, 70-minute practices. You're going to have 90-minute practices. Maybe you have a few, 140, maybe occasionally an hour and 40 minutes. But like I said, maybe you have a little bit more of those, but I don't think you're going to see the drastic change that some people were hoping for, because, I think the Eagles have made the right decision, to be honest, over the years, because, once the tipping point came and, a lot of work, the old school work, the two-a-days was legislated out of the game. You can't do it. Then it became a cost benefit thing where, all right, you can't prepare like you used to anyway. So I think it became the thought process of, let's get to week one as healthy as possible. I think that's been the Eagles' thought. I think it's the correct thought. But yeah, it leads to some sloppy play early, but that's everywhere, because
especially with new coordinators, though. I think that's where it's heightened a little bit this year.
Yeah, and we're going to have Aaron Schatz from FTN Football Almanac, Football Outsiders, rebranded. So for people that understand that, we're going to have him on. And the numbers aren't great for teams typically who have two new coordinators. And you saw it last year. But the difference is these guys are experienced, so maybe it's a little bit less of an issue versus, say, last year when you had Brian Johnson as a first-time professional offensive coordinator, and Sean Desai, who had 1 year of experience but was new here. That's a lot different than Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. So, but generally, and we'll get Aaron to talk about this. Generally, two new coordinators is not a good thing.
Definitely not. Johnny Mac, let's continue real quick. We only have about 13 minutes until Aaron Schatz from FTN for the numbers joins our program. So we'll have him in hour number one. We will have Zack Burman from PHLY. You guys all know Zack Burman, I'm sure, obviously. A well-regarded Eagles beat reporter. So we will have him in hour number two. Zack Burman, excited to talk to him on the show. And then here we are in hour number one. Before Aaron Schatz, we're going to continue our training camp previews. Yesterday, we went through the linebackers. We've been working our way through the defense. Last week, we finished up on the offense. Johnny Mac, let's talk cornerback. Walk us through your preview at the open here of how you're seeing.
Wow, it's like your head spins. There's so many of them.
Yeah,
it's there's 90. I mean, you can make an argument because James Bradbury, as long as he's here, they claim they're gonna move him to safety. We'll see how deep they go with that, but I think everybody knows he's a cornerback. And even some of the guys they've moved to safety, Mekhi Gardner being the latest, has a cornerback background. Tristan McCullum has a cornerback background. Andre Sam has a cornerback background. I mean, it's like you got about 20 guys who can play corner. Even Sidney Brown is a safety. He played in the slot a bunch last year. So they have so many bodies, and I think it's to the point of overcorrection because last year was such a disaster. And they want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So the adage is that you never have enough corners in the NFL. Well, the Eagles are testing that because they have loaded up at the cornerback position. And there's a lot of upside, a lot of excitement, as well as I think there should be over the potential of this group. But you also got to be honest and realize there's going to be some growing pains, and much of the excitement is about completely unproven players. And but I'd rather be the Eagles this year than last year, certainly.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They certainly put some assets into the position. My worry with the cornerback room, John, is that it's going to take a year, and obviously I don't think it will take a year. Hopefully we can, be formidable this year at the group, but they threw a lot of younger assets at it, a lot of young guys that don't have tremendous experience. It's not like they went out and signed a Darius Slay like they did when they picked up Slay, and you shored up the position immediately. So that would be my one big worry on it is how long does it take for some of these young guys to get up to NFL game speed? I feel great about how we're positioned at the room for 2025, but we're talking about 2024, and that's where, I have concern is how quickly will these guys get up to speed and be able to, be a viable NFL corner for the Eagles.
Well, we kind of talked about this yesterday a little bit with BLG, I think, Brandon Gouton, and the fact that from my standpoint, his prediction was Isaiah Rodgers is going to start opposite Darius Slay. And look, it wouldn't surprise me. He played tremendous in the spring, and that's the last thing everyone saw. So I don't think it's a wild prediction by any stretch, but I think it's the wrong way to go if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. And I point back to Kansas City a couple of years ago, and you said you feel very comfortable. Maybe it'll take a year. I'm hoping it takes about half a year.
Yeah, that's fair.
So you're going to have growing pains, but I would advocate throwing Quinyon Mitchell into the deep end of the pool, Cooper DeJean into the deep end of the pool. And you're going to have some of those. And I always use Jim's term. Mike Rowe loves it as well. Startup cost. Got to get them over with. So get them over with talented players. And I think if the Eagles go any other direction, it's a mistake, to be honest. Now, you can throw Kaylee Ringo in there as well in the same category, but those three specific guys, get it over with. I think, and that doesn't mean, look, if they show up in the summer, if they show up next week and they perform horribly in camp, okay, then you go in a different direction. A, I don't think that's going to happen. They're too gifted. They're too talented. And B, but my point is, if Isaiah Rodgers plays a little bit better than Quinyon Mitchell, and you want to go the meritocracy route, you don't understand what this whole thing's about. I'm sorry. One player's got a tremendously high ceiling. Another player's a nice, solid player. Your goal is to get Quinyon Mitchell out there. Get him out there. You drafted him for a reason. Get the startup cost early. That's where I am with this group.
Yep.
And hopefully then by the second half of the season, like happened in Kansas City 2 years ago, all of a sudden these guys the game starts slowing down. They get more comfortable and they start making plays, and you see the difference. That's the way I think the Eagles should go with this group.
Yeah, and that's how I felt about, the whole Isaiah Rodgers thing from jump, is the business of the NFL going to get in the way of his playing time? If it plays out like you said, I would be perfectly okay with that, because I want the guy who's got the long-term future, who's got the upside, and who's under contract here in Philly for the next couple years. So that's, how it could play out. We'll see how it does. John, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked our last couple guests. Who's going to be the starting corner opposite Darius Slay on week 1 in Green Bay or in?
Well, I'm on Team Quinyon.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to get him out there. Opposite, again, if he has a terrible training camp, which I don't think is going to happen, he was very good in the spring. For all the talk of how good Rodgers and Ringo were, he was very good in the spring. So I don't see any evidence that he's going to have trouble. A lot of people talked about him playing at Toledo and not making the transfer and going somewhere else. And he had the opportunity to show his skill set against a higher level of competition. I just think he's good. So get him out there. And I say the same thing about Cooper DeJean. And I think Avonte Maddox is really good if he's ever able to stay healthy. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but my sentiment's the same with Cooper. Get him out there. And they will, even if they're not starting, they're certainly going to be mixed in. Traditionally, cornerback's not a rotational position, but in this case, I think Vic is smart enough to know he's going to have to get these guys involved and stick their feet in the fire. So why not do it easy? Now, some people are going to hem and haw and say it's Green Bay week 1, it's Jordan Love, it's all those explosive young receivers. Guess what? It's the NFL, man. It ain't getting any easier. Throw them in that pool. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, I could also make a case for Keely Ringo, but I guess he would be the guy on the other side backing up Darius Slay in case something were to happen to Slay. Is that how you see his role in the team?
Well, I pretty much put Kelce. I should add him, and I did in the one. I put him in the same category, really. I think the Eagles have 3 good young prospects at cornerback, and he's the 3rd. So he's in the mix as well. And everybody knows I have tremendous I like his upside. I think he's got a chance to be a really good corner in this league. And, you always go back to Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata. All right, Andre didn't work out. You hope Quinyon works out. You hope Cooper works out. But if Kelee Ringo works out and one of them doesn't, all right.
Right.
Keep marching forward. And so I put them in the same category with those two guys.
Makes sense. Not a lot of time here to do a position that has so many damn bodies. So maybe we will circle back to finish it up. But Johnny Mac, who do you see staying on this roster? It's a deep unit. I mean, they're not going to keep everybody, obviously. They only got 53 slots on the roster. Who do you see as locks for this roster? Who's on the bubble and who's going?
Well, the locks are obviously Slay and Quinyon and Cooper and Kelce and Rodgers. And I would say those are the absolute locks. I think Avonte's close to a lock. The only hesitation is obviously the injury parts. And the Eagles have adjusted the contract. So if some of these young guys that we haven't talked about, like Tyler Hall, if they show that they can play, maybe you think about moving on, but I got Avonte at about 95%. And then it becomes All right, Josh Jobe is maybe your best special teams player.
Right. So you got to start thinking about that back of the roster, different values at those spots.
Yeah. And I think, the Eagles are going to go heavy at corner, light at safety to keep as many of their young corners as possible. Like, they don't want to lose Eli Ricks. You saw that last year. But, I mean, the numbers start to say he's got a tough road. And we're not even talking about guys like Zach McPherson anymore. Poor Zach, who's finally going to be cleared as training camp starts from his Achilles. He was going to be the backup slot corner. Now you can't even find a path for that poor guy to make this roster. Tyler Hall is another guy. How is he going to make this roster? So, Howie will try to manipulate it and get as many on the practice squad as possible, but they're probably going to lose an NFL level corner or two at the cut to 53.
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. This is a good little breakout here from Paul Mancini, just one of our chatters. Paul, thanks for being here, brother. He says, starting outside, Slay and Ringo, backup outside, Rodgers, Mitchell, slot nickel, Maddox, and Cooper DeJean. That's a pretty good breakout there on how it might play out with the cornerbacks. Obviously, there's a couple names that can be interchanged in terms of, maybe you have Mitchell starting over Ringo, but that's a pretty good rundown on how it might play out.
Yeah, those 6 guys are good bet, and they're probably going to keep a 7th, as I said, and go heavy at the position. But and because of the versatility, Navonte can play safety. Cooper, at least a lot of people project that he can play safety. The Eagles haven't put him there yet, so it's all a projection. But they do have some versatile guys as well. So I do think they're going to go heavy at corner to potentially keep as many of those young bodies as possible.
Let's get to our first commercial break. Johnny Mac, Aaron Schatz in the waiting room. Aaron Schatz, Chief Analytics Officer of FTN Fantasy for the Numbers, creator of the DVOA. So we will talk to Aaron Schatz coming up next on Birds 365. Thanks, everybody in the chat, for being here this morning. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show to help us reach more Eagles fans. We appreciate you all being here. Stay tuned. Aaron Schatz coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365, joined now by Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. Aaron, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. Good morning. I think we're here to talk about the Eagles, not the Cardinals or Seahawks, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about everything with you, Aaron, because we want to talk about it. We want to bring you in to talk about the league as a whole, but certainly we're going to talk Eagles. Good to see you again, Aaron Schatz, Chief Analytics Officer at FTN and the creator of dvoa. So every time I've talked to you, Aaron, I start the same way, and I want you to give the quick, I think you call it the ultra short version of dvoa for those who don't know about it, and they should know about it.
Yes. So what we do is we judge the success of every play based on the down and distance, and then compare that to a league average baseline that is adjusted for situation and opponent. And that is how we get DVOA. And it's tweaked to try to be as predictive as possible. We have the stats going back 45 years, and we can do historical research with it, and we can look at the future season with it.
And this is the 20th anniversary. People remember rebranding. Used to be Football Outsiders. Now it's FTN. But the same great information from Aaron, our buddy Mike Tenier, who's always on the show. We'll give him a shout out as well, as he did the Eagles preview. We'll start with the Eagles with you, Aaron, but I want you, there's a lot of hype around this team locally. I think everybody looks at them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Maybe they should pump the brakes. At least from the numbers and what you guys are looking at. How do you look at the Eagles, not only in relationship to the NFC East, but the conference as a whole?
Yeah, it's always weird to go out and promote my preseason book when we're not as high on the team as the fans are. So we're like, come read our book where we're pessimistic about your team. That's great.
Fair point.
But we are a little bit pessimistic. Now, one thing that I've talked about a lot when I've been on podcasts for teams that did really well in the second half of last year, like Chicago, is that second half performance does not tend to roll over to the following year. As much as that seems counterintuitive, the best way to predict how a team will do this year is to look at how they played over the entire season last year, not just the second half of the year. So we can't say, oh, the Eagles collapsed in the second half of the year, so they're going to be terrible this year. The problem is the collapse in the second half of the year dragged their numbers for the whole year down. So they come out as like 14th in DVOA last season. And I don't really see a lot of reasons to believe that they're going to be better than that this year. And it's not that I don't like the moves that they've made. I think they made the right moves that they could make. But, you know, for example, when you have new coordinators with new systems, all else being equal, you tend to take a little bit of a step back while people learn the new systems. We wrote about this very specifically last year with Fangio in Miami. That Fangio does not have a history of turning defenses around immediately. Usually takes a year or two for his scheme to really come into place. I like the defensive, taking defensive players high in the draft tends to result in a good performance quicker than taking offensive players high in the draft. But I think that fans of the Eagles may be underplaying the importance of Jason Kelce, and that loss is a big one for the offensive line. So when you put it all together, what we end up with is a team that should be a little bit above average. And I think that the high end of the range of possibilities is a Super Bowl contender, but that it's more likely that they're a wild card contender.
How much does the rosters go into it, Aaron? I mean, people talk about the Eagles roster, especially on offense. I mean, defense, they have their litany of problems, but on offense, they got Saquon, they have AJ, they have all these guys, and people across the league, I think that's part of the reason they're rated so highly, especially locally, is that they feel so great about all the great players. How much do the great players impact, how you project what a team's going to be in the future year?
I mean, we start with performance, right, over the last 3 years, mostly last year. And then we look at how the roster has changed from year to year, okay? And we try to account for the players that have come in and out. That being said, running back additions rarely move the needle. I know analytics people sound like a broken record. I just used like 2 record metaphors in the same sentence. But that's what you get. I'm an ex-disc jockey. Saquon is good. I don't know if at this point in his career, Saquon Barkley is one of the few running backs who really makes a difference. If he is, certainly it would be as a receiver. And the holes that the offensive line should make for him should give him great stats. But they had that last year. They had big holes from the offensive line last year. So I don't know how much of an upgrade Barkley really is. And that's the guy that they're hanging their hat on for the offense to improve this year, because otherwise it's mostly the same offense as last year, except no Kelce and yay, Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell's never really done anything, so there's really not a yay.
And I think it's interesting because that brings the Giants into the discussion. And I don't know if you've been following Hard Knocks, Aaron, but that's a big story here in Philadelphia. Saquon leaving the Giants, coming to the Eagles. And this is what I love about dvoa is the fact that you guys kind of explain, if people want to take the time to learn, that all situations are not created equally. I think it was a no-brainer for the New York Giants to move on from Saquon. For the Eagles, maybe it works because it's a luxury. It's an added addition. You already have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. You already have this explosive offense. They're better prepared to utilize a Saquon Barkley. So I bring that into, expand it to the NFC East. We know the history of this division. Teams don't win it 2 years in a row. It's been a long time. Dallas, that's bad news for Dallas. They haven't had a great offseason. The Giants, John Mara's more of a fan, it seems. He's losing sleep because they never won a damn game with Saquon Barkley, and he's losing sleep. Washington, Jaden Daniels, a lot of uncertainty. How do you project that? How do you get all that into a sort of a pile and come out looking good?
I think this is the year that breaks the string of teams winning the division twice in a row.
Nice.
I think that people want to slag on Dallas a little bit because they have failed in the playoffs, but winning in the regular season, is winning in the regular season. And they've shown they can do that. They've won 12 games for 3 straight years. And there's no reason to believe their team's going to be really much worse this year than it's been the last 3 years. So I expect them to win a lot of games again. I mean, there's lots to argue about with Dallas. Like, why are they not signing their best player for the future? But that doesn't change the fact that that is a good team for this year's regular season. Washington, you're right, lots of uncertainty. You cannot expect a rookie quarterback to be good. They might be really bad. The fact is, if you look at all the teams with rookie quarterbacks plus Indianapolis, which effectively has a rookie quarterback with Anthony Richardson, one of those teams at least is going to really surprise people and be really good. But we have no idea which of those teams it is. It might be Washington. Washington also might be 2-15. You just don't know with a rookie quarterback. And the Giants, I think, are the worst team in the league because they have no hope. All the other teams at the bottom of our projections have hope, right? Chicago, if Caleb Williams is good, we're totally wrong.
Yeah.
Washington, if Jaden Daniels is good, we're totally wrong. Arizona, if Kyler Murray can find what he had 2 years ago before his injuries, we're wrong about them. I don't see the situation in which the Giants suddenly become a 10-win team and win this division. They just do not have the talent to do that.
The NFC as a whole, legitimate Super Bowl contenders that you guys are projecting, the teams that have a real shot if the stars align to be in that conversation. Where's that? What's that group and where's that cutoff point?
I mean, I don't tend to believe in a cutoff point. I tend to believe that every team has a shot at the Super Bowl. It's just a very, it's a gradual decline in abilities. Because the way I talk about it is, I remember 1999. And when Trent Green got hurt, people thought the Rams were the worst team.
Yeah, Dick Vermeil was crying. Let's be honest.
Everybody's got a shot, right?
Yeah.
That being said, San Francisco is the best team in our projections. And because the AFC is harder than the NFC, San Francisco, that gives them an easier road into the Super Bowl than Baltimore, Kansas City has. I think Detroit is a legit contender. I cannot explain Dallas's thing in the playoffs, but I think that they're a legit contender if they can ever solve that. I think the Rams could definitely do it. I think the Seahawks are an above-average team, but it's hard to see them likely getting to a Super Bowl. And the team that I'm high on that no one else is New Orleans, but that's not because they're Super Bowl contenders. It's because they're an average team with a really easy schedule. They're not. They look like the team that's going to win the NFC South and lose in the first round. So, I mean,
now the one team I would add, because this is the team I'm high on, and I think it's the best team in the NFC, Detroit. I thought they were the best team.
Detroit.
Best team in the NFC last year, to be honest. They should have won. They should have beat San Francisco. They got a little bit too aggressive, but that's how they got there. And I think everybody looks at that and says, Dan Campbell's an idiot. No, he isn't. I mean, if they make one play, they're going to the Super Bowl.
Guys were open on those fourth downs. And Reynolds dropped the ball. On
Exactly. So that to me is the team. I look at that team and I go, they got something cooking there.
I thought I mentioned Detroit. We have Detroit as the second best team in the NFC.
Yeah.
And I should mention Green Bay. Green Bay also has a shot, I think.
Yeah.
But we have Detroit as the second best team in the NFC. I think their defense is going to be a little bit better this year. They have a very good offense. Yes, I'm high on Detroit.
Yeah.
Where are the Eagles, Aaron, in this? I mean, I know you said you were a little bit pessimistic, and it's tough talking to an Eagles base when you telling them to come read it when you're not high on the team. But you just laid out a bunch of teams in the NFC. Where do you have the Eagles projecting coming into the year?
We have the Eagles project with an average of 8.8 wins, which ranks them 16th in the league and 8th in the NFC.
Dead smack mediocre, dead in the middle.
A little bit better than mediocre,
a
little bit better than average. And again, I mean, there's upside here. I mean, we could be wrong. If you see, the thing is, if you look at the parts of the roster, it feels like they're better than that.
Yeah.
But when you look at the performance of the sum of the parts, especially last year's performance, they're like the 14th or 15th best team in the league. That's what they were last year. They were not as good as their record when they started 9-1, and then they completely collapsed. And I can't, the defense should be a little bit better this year. And defense is harder to predict than offense, and defenses turn things around without anybody expecting it, surprisingly. But it's not likely that the defense turns things around, which means the defense is going to drag the offense down again.
Yeah, one thing Mike noted in his Eagles preview that I took notice of is the history is not great when you have two new coordinators. And it happened to the Eagles last year, but it was a disaster, to be honest. Brian Johnson, first-time NFL coordinator. Sean decided to make it the season before he was demoted. This year, you got two new coordinators again, which is bad, but at least they're veteran coordinators, and they've done it before. Does that shift things a little bit? I know you mentioned something about Fangio. Typically, it takes him a while, but the Eagles have been running his scheme. It's been his guys. Gannon copied the scheme. Sean Desai's a direct disciple.
Yeah, that might be a reason for it to turn around a little faster, I think. Yeah. But, when you change, have both coordinators change, it shows a couple of things. It's often a brain drain. I don't think that's the case here. It shows that things are a little bit messy. It shows that things with the team are a little bit messy. I think that is the case here. And then again, it takes usually new coordinators, all else being equal. I mean, usually when a team has new coordinators, they get better because they were really bad the previous year. If you control for that, then new coordinators usually see things a little bit worse because it takes time to learn the schemes.
Yeah. Aaron, I might be putting you on the spot here in terms of, just going off your memory, but how much did the 2023 Eagles, based on DVOA and the metrics you're using, differ from the 2022 Eagles, which marched their way to the Super Bowl and basically lost in the last couple minutes of the game? I mean, the rosters weren't that different from 22 to 23, drastically different results. Just curious how different it looked, in those 2 years, and if that might be a predictor of what's to come as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have a rebound effect, and the defense, one reason to believe the defense will be better is the rebound effect. The offense went from 3rd in DVOA to 10th. Small difference. Really wasn't that big a difference, honestly. The defense went from 3rd to 29th.
Yeah.
That was the difference.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, the special teams went to number 1, but special teams are very inconsistent. And nobody knows this year. Like, special teams this year is a big black box.
Yeah.
No one knows how the new kickoff is going to be.
Yeah.
But it was defense. Defense collapsed last year. Like, could the offense get back to what they did 2 years ago? Yeah. I mean, I feel like with Kelce gone, that I feel like people are just sort of poo-pooing that as a big loss. I especially don't know how much Kelce meant to the brotherly shove. He's right in the middle of that thing, right? Like that. He could be a big part of the reason why the Eagles are so much more successful with that play than everyone else.
Yeah.
And now he's gone.
Oh, he's a big part of it. He stole half a yard with his manipulation of the football. I always joke about Jason. I don't know if you watch an Eagles game, Aaron, but he would steal, like, I'm exaggerating, but he'd steal like 10 inches. He'd move the ball.
Framing. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. A good baseball analogy. And he would. And he had the reputation. I think, that's something that's, it's not going to be able to show up in any statistics. But when you have that reputation, the veteran guy, 6-time All-Pro, going to be in the Hall of Fame, they let you get away with something, maybe more than a younger player. So I think you're on to something. But I got to tell you, Aaron, the Eagles with the quarterback sneak, they were great before the tush push. Carson Wentz was great at it when he was here.
Yeah, but he also had Kelce.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
that's what I'm saying.
Kelce's
a big part of it, is what I was trying to get to. So I think you're on to something there. While we have, I want to look at the AFC. Kansas City, obviously, has to be a significant contender. A lot of change in Baltimore, though. I thought they were the best team throughout the regular season in the AFC. So I want to get your thoughts on them. And then the team that is the young up-and-coming team, you mentioned rookie quarterbacks. They might be good. C.J. Stroud. I mean, they turned that around. Yeah, they turned that around so quickly. So how high are you guys on the Houston Texans taking that next step as well?
Baltimore, to talk about first, Baltimore was record-setting in our stats during the regular season.
They were unbelievable.
Even with the players that they've lost, I think they have to be considered the top team in the AFC going into this year, with Kansas City right behind them. I think, even with the offensive line losses, I'm not as worried about some of their defensive losses. I mean, Geno Stone was like the third safety, and Patrick Queen had not been that great in previous seasons. I'm worried about McDonald. I'm more worried about the loss of the coordinator on defense than I am about
Anthony Weaver. They lost a bunch of coaches too. Anthony Weaver is now the defensive coordinator in Miami. Denard Wilson, who was here, is now the defensive coordinator in Tennessee. Yeah. So they got gutted. John Harbaugh got gutted.
They were so ahead of the rest of the AFC in the regular season that I still have them very high projected. But as far as Houston goes, I'm a big believer. I'm definitely a believer in Houston. Stroud was so good last year that there's a good possibility he won't actually improve in his second year because he already was so good. But I mean, they won the lottery, man. He's really good. And they've got good defensive players, and I like the moves they make. And if Diggs is healthy, unlike the second half of last year, that's a good move to bring in for their wide receivers. And the AFC is very strong. 8 of our top 12 projected teams are in the AFC, which means one of those teams has to miss the playoffs, even if they all meet expectations.
Yeah, it is. And I think it starts with the quarterbacks. I mean, the AFC is just deeper at quarterback. I mean, they just.
And then the AFC also has the 3 highest projected defenses in my numbers, right? Cleveland, the Jets,
Jim Schwartz. Yeah, our old buddy Jim Schwartz. Yeah,
whose offense will be terrible, so they're not actually going to be contenders. But
yeah, I kind of feel bad for
Cleveland has a reasonable offense. So
it's interesting you went there with the Patriots because I think, I'm with you with Drake May. I feel kind of sorry for him because situation matters so much for a young quarterback. But if you look at the young quarterbacks, I mean, Chicago. On paper, they have DJ Moore, and they drafted another potential difference maker, and they're doing everything. But boy, I got a tough time. I mean, they have not been able to develop quarterbacks. You saw what they did to Justin Fields. A little bit concerned there. The one guy who and it's ironic because I don't know why he was a first-round pick. He barely played at Michigan. And when he did play, they would often not let him throw the ball, and all of a sudden, he's a top-tier pick. But then I look at J.J. McCarthy, and he's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Jordan Addison if he stops doing stupid stuff in his car. If T.J. Hawkinson is back. Aaron Jones, who I think is one of the more underrated backs, even though he's getting a little bit older. He had a great playoff run. He single-handedly beat the Cowboys in the playoffs. He's got the best situation. So I'm kind of torn. I think J.J. McCarthy's got this great situation. Poor Drake May, who I think could be a good player, has got nothing.
Well, that's why Drake may not play very much this year. They're probably going to use Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback, certainly to start the season. I think that the Patriots are building something with wide receivers. They need to get a number one. I don't know if Jalen Polk is that guy. They have no left tackle, and you don't want Drake May to play behind a bad offensive line and get bad habits like David Carr or something. So I wouldn't expect
a
lot of Drake May this year. But I don't think he's completely left in the lurch. I think we just don't know. We don't know Alex Van Pelt developing quarterbacks. We just don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
Aaron, let me play devil's advocate with you here. And as a guy who has a career in analytics, I'm sure you deal with this question a lot. How much do you factor, if at all, the non-number stuff into these type of evaluations where there's a human element? There's some of the things that people talk about where there's a knock on analytics out there who, the people that don't love it. How much is that a factor, or is it not a factor at all?
Well, we don't incorporate things that aren't in the numbers in our numbers because they're the numbers. But that's why we don't publish a book that's nothing but tables of numbers. We put words next to them because we watch a lot of film and we want to talk about the intangibles. And I mean, a good example of this is the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Mike Tomlin, the greatness of Mike Tomlin is in intangible things.
Yeah.
Within his locker room management and his ability to incentivize players.
Right.
And that exists, but we can't incorporate it in our numbers. And so we write about it separate from our numbers.
Yeah. And it makes sense. At A Shots NFL, make sure you follow Aaron on X or Twitter, if you like to call it that. Still 20th anniversary, by the way, of the now FTN Football Almanac. You know it as Football Outsiders for years and years. Does a tremendous job. Love when we can get them. You should go buy this. If you want to be a smarter football fan, FTNfantasy.com. You can get it there. You can get it digital. I think the hard copies are coming out soon.
Hard copy is available now at Amazon.
It is available now. And that's you should get this thing in a hard copy because you got to sit and peruse it and read it. And you're a smarter football fan. So thanks for stopping by, Aaron. Appreciate it always when I get to talk to you. Yeah, one of the smartest guys in football, and it's can't come more highly recommended, even if you're not as high on the Philadelphia Eagles as you should be, according.
Well, thank you, and hopefully you can have me on at midseason and tell me why I was so
There
wrong.
we go.
Because
There
they're
we go.
7-2 or something.
And we are going to take you up on that, Aaron.
We absolutely will.
Of course, they were 10-1 last year. That didn't mean anything. So
we might want to wait till like
week not going to
14
get
or 15,
people excited, Aaron. To be honest, they're going to be disappointed with 7-2. But appreciate it. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you, man. There's Aaron Schatz joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff there. A little bit of a different look than we're used to. Deep in the analytics, some good stuff there. Some good things to take. Johnny Mac, how much do you factor that stuff in? Like, you're not you view analytics, you appreciate them, you study them, you're aware of them, and then you're also a reporter where you see the inside, you see the locker room, you see the players, the talent, all of the other things. How much do you factor in like that stuff when you hear Aaron said they're going to win 8.5 games or whatever his projection was based on the numbers versus,
Yeah, well, I say the same thing with PFF, and I think, people see me and they see I'm older, and they, typically older people aren't open to newer ideas. I pride myself on being open to newer ideas, and I always say for the people that criticize PFF, and they like it when, as I said, when AJ Brown's got a great grade, or Lane or Jordan Mailata or Landon Dickerson, et cetera. They don't like it when Devin, and they're stupid when they give Devin White a bad grade. No, it's just, fandom showing through. In the case of Aaron, what they do better and dvoa does better than anybody else is what I was talking about with Saquon Barkley. All situations are not created equal.
Yeah.
So I brought up that Hard Knocks because that's been a theme throughout the season. Like Joe Shane was on that show saying, we can't pay, we can't pay a $13 million running back with a $40 million quarterback. And everybody jumped on social media. So the Eagles are paying them with a $50 million quarterback. The Eagles are not in the same situation as the New York Giants. All situations are not created equally. Two situations are not created equally. The New Orleans Saints, the Los Angeles Rams, the Kansas City Chiefs, enter any team you want. They all are different situations than the Philadelphia Eagles. So these stupid comps don't make sense. And what dvoa does better than anybody else is they create sort of this baseline for each and every play and understand the situation is different. So, as Aaron will describe it, if I gave him the opportunity, he would say, 5 yards on 3rd and 5 is a hell of a lot important than 5 yards on 3rd and 15. A lot more meaningful.
That stuff makes complete sense to me. Where 5 yards is obviously more valuable on 3rd and 4 than 3rd and 15.
They measure each play individually and give it that baseline, and then you go up or you go down. And that's why generally it's been the best measure of team success and why so many people default to it and so many people use it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely in the weeds type of analytics. It's definitely, I don't want to use the word nerdy type, but it's math. I mean, it's
nerd. It's nerdy.
Yeah, it's nerd. I mean, it's deep in the analytics. It's not. I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but I do think there needs to be a little bit of a balance where, I get what he's saying about the Cowboys and the Eagles, but I don't view the Eagles as an 8.5 win team. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just being a fan, but
no, and remember, it's just a projection. It's a projection based model. So no, I have the Eagles winning 11 games. But I do think the room is, when we do that Jody Mack exercise of going up or going down, I went down. I think, there's plenty of avenues for the Eagles to hit their ceiling. There's plenty of avenues for them to go in a different direction, unfortunately, as well. And he mentioned, that's another thing they do well is they put words next to the charts. And, our buddy Mike Tanier, who's on the show a lot, did the Eagles part of it. And, he explained some of these things about the history of two coordinators, which you saw in living color. And as even with a guy with a reputation, this is a very nomadic profession. So you can follow Vic Fangio from San Francisco to Chicago to Denver to Miami to Philadelphia. And, his history is that first year, there's some ramp up. And then when he has his good defense, second, third year, it gets better and better. So there's that history as well. So they have the words and they point out certain things, and there's a lot of positive as well. So it's not all negative. They're very high on the rookie picks. Saquon is interesting to me because I don't, and this is where I criticize Howie, and they kind of agree with me in the fact that even if you turn, I find it hilarious that people think I hate Saquon Barkley, yet I expect more out of him than the Zander Krauses and the Bill Colarulos of the world. I think he's going to have a better year than you guys. And so the impact is what I've been talking about. From to use your guys' projections, he's not going to be much better than DeAndre Swift or Miles Sanders, which is kind of where I was at the beginning of this.
Right.
He'll be that much better than those guys. Now, as the final piece of the puzzle, it might make some sense where it didn't make sense with the New York Giants. The stuff where I would say there's some holes, like Dallas. Now, look, and you talked about the human element a little bit, Zander. I think people forget, yes, Dallas, I don't agree with their business acumen at all. And their, Jerry Jones's willingness to pay a tax for being reactive instead of proactive. But they still have Dak Prescott. They still have Micah Parsons. They still have CeeDee Lamb. They're still going to be on the field for them. So
they got a ton of good players. They got the cornerbacks too. I mean, you're right. Dallas definitely still has a lot of good players.
The issue becomes, does that weigh on them? Does that weigh on Dak Prescott because he doesn't have a new deal? Does that weigh on CeeDee Lamb? Does that weigh on Micah Parsons? That's the human element nobody can measure. So that part is real. And certainly being around it, you saw last year with the Eagles collapse. Nobody could have predicted that. That quote of the most miserable 10-1 team ever was, in hindsight, very apropos. Like the expectations wore on that team. It literally wore on them to the point where they collapsed under it. And that's
most miserable 10-1 team you ever saw in your life.
And that's the human element we're talking about. You can't measure that.
Yeah, that's where I struggle with the analytics, to be honest. I see the place for them, but just like you said,
they're valuable as long as you use them correctly.
Right, in context. I mean, look, that's where I'm just like, last year, you would have never been able to DVOA your way into the Eagles are going to collapse at the end of the year. Same year when we won the Super Bowl. I mean, nobody would have ever said, based on any metric ever, that Nick Foles would go on to win the Super Bowl. I think sometimes the human element, or just, the nature of the game, it takes over, and it doesn't care about analytics and numbers and data. I get it. It's a good
well, yeah, and that's why you have to know it. I always bring
you
see these stupid if you watch games live, now you have these projections. Like if the Phillies are ahead in the ninth inning, there's a 99.4% they're going to win the game. And then all of a sudden somebody hits a grand slam and it's blown up. But it doesn't change the fact that the numbers say 99% of the time you're going to win that game. That's what they're saying. Not that there can't be an outlier.
Right.
That's what a projection model is. And as long as you know what it is, it's very, very valuable.
Yeah.
You know, when Joe Banner, the Eagles were one of the first team to sort of embrace analytics. And I remember Joe saying, all right, you know, we got the data, you know, tell me how to evaluate the data. Give me some value. In other words, you want it to be actionable. Like, I don't care. You can throw the numbers at me, but it's got to be actionable to help you gain an advantage over somebody else. And that's where the Eagles have been ahead of the curve when it comes to analytics. Everybody's got the same numbers. Now, find something in those numbers that makes me better than the opponent because I can act on it.
Yeah, it's information. It's context and information. How you use it is up to you, and I certainly agree with that. What I will say, great respect to Aaron Schatz. I thought he did a great job today. I think he does great work over at FTN. I would encourage everybody to go and buy the Almanac just for what Johnny Mack is saying. It's more it's more information. It makes you a smarter fan. Whether you agree with everything or not is fine. I'm not going to sit here and say I think the Eagles are going to win 8 games because that's what the DVOA says. I would never.
8.8. Let's be fair, and that's just the medium. I agree. They're going to be above that. But there's plenty of good numbers in there that allow you to understand a little bit. I mentioned yesterday I got it from those guys because they were nice enough to send me the manual and the fact that, I didn't know the Eagles. I know the Eagles didn't throw it over the middle of the field. I didn't know they were 32nd, dead last. And I sure as hell didn't know they were really successful when they did it. Which 4th or 5th in the league. That's the kind of stuff that they bring to the table. Yeah, it's a really, like, if you're getting a preview NFL magazine or book, and this is a book, it's like 450 pages. This is the one to get, is my recommendation.
There you go, Johnny Mac, stamp of approval. Let's go to our super chat from James Carver. You know Johnny Mac how it is. Not everybody in our chat box likes to hear from a numbers guy that we're going to win 8.5 ball games this year, which I understand. I really do. James Carver says $10. James, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Making metrics beyond one tool and toolbox is akin to when they used modeling to construct number one song based on all hits characters, and it ended up being complete noise that flopped.
Yeah, well, and you didn't hear Aaron say the Eagles are going to win 8.8 games. One reason is because they can't win 8.8 games.
Well, he did say that he thinks the Cowboys are going to win the NFC.
Yes, he did. And the Cowboys, look, I mean, we're an Eagles show. They don't like the Cowboys. The Cowboys have been really freaking good. Nobody paid attention. As Aaron pointed out, they won, double-digit games. Season after season after season.
They're regular season champions. That's the Cowboys' MO in the 21st century. Yeah.
That's what you're talking about when you're winning the NFC East. You're talking about the regular season.
Yeah, no, I know. You're right. I'm not saying you're wrong.
But the history is a history, and nobody's gone back to back in this division. So, and I don't think the Giants are coming up. I agree with Aaron. That might be the worst team in football. I do have some hope for Washington, but there's so much uncertainty with Jaden Daniels. So it's Eagles or Cowboys, and history will tell you it's the Eagles' turn.
Yep, let's get to our commercial break, Johnny Mac. We still have about 18 minutes to go, 17 minutes to go until we get Zack Burman from PHLY, from all PHLY. Good stuff from Zack. He's always been one of my favorite Eagles beat reporters to follow, to read, and to see cover the team. So excited to talk to him. It's our first time talking to him in a while here on Birds 365. So we'll do that at 9:20. Coming up out of the break, I want to ask you one thing about Kellen Moore you wrote about, but I also want to finish up our cornerback talk. I think there was a couple questions out there that we got to hit on, a couple players I want to hit on specifically that we'll talk about. So we'll do all that next on Birds 365. If you guys are in the chat, appreciate it. Make sure you guys hit the like button. Stay tuned. Zack Burman coming up in hour 2, and then a question on Kellen Moore and the cornerbacks coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. Just 5 days out, everybody. 5 freaking days until the Philadelphia Eagles report to training camp. Boy, it came quick. I'm excited for us to get back out there. As I mentioned at the top of the show, maybe not everybody was here. Obviously, more people watching now than when we start the show in the first couple minutes, but Johnny Mac got the schedule. We got the schedule for next week. It's an early. They try and get out there pretty early. So John's going to be pretty tied up with stuff. So stay tuned. Birds 365 might have some scheduling changes on when we do the show. Our commitment to you is 2 hours of Eagles talk on Birds 365 every single day. What time that is, that might change depending on the schedule and how it breaks out. But stay tuned. We will update you and keep you guys posted on exactly what that will look like. Appreciate all your guys' viewership. Johnny Mac, let's finish up real quick on the cornerback discussion. It's a deep room, and we only had about 12 to 15 minutes to talk about it. So I just want to close it out. About where we are at that position. Do you view it as a position of strength coming into this year? I know we talked about all the young guys and who might start, but a lot of young guys, a lot of potential in the room. How much do the rookies have a factor on the room? What else are you thinking about when you think about that position coming into the season?
Well, I think of the importance of Slay, being where he is in his career, being the type of player he is, and the fact that he's open, maybe more than any other player. I always see Slay on social media talking about, everybody's Lane Johnson had been down at the O-line Masterminds summit that he's been a big part of over the years, where all the offensive linemen get together. Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Greg Olson started Tight End University. Von Miller might have been the first back in the day, starting his pass rushing camp, where all the pass rushers would get together and help each other. Slay's always been pitching it to the D-backs and saying, we should get together. We should do this. And I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't do it, or they haven't done it to this point. But, if you see him talk about young players, if you see him talk about other players around the league, he's always so positive. He's always so helpful to younger players. And some Eagles fans don't like it because he's giving other people props around the league. But when you take it inside the locker room, that's what he does with, and how he talked about it with Quinyon Mitchell. And he joked that he wanted him to live with Slay to try to become the best corner that he could be. And he's always helping these young guys. So that's another one of those intangibles that
you have any fears
can't measure.
With Slay, John?
What's that?
Do you have any fears, not fears, but any concerns with Slay coming into the year that, look, Father Time is undefeated. He is getting up there. It's not like he's 31, 32. He's like nearly 35 now.
He's 33. And his birthday is on New Year's Day. So
I thought he was older, but not 33. Okay, that's a little bit better. I thought he was turning 35 in New Year's, so he'll turn 34. Got it.
Yeah. So he'll probably be 34 if the Eagles make the playoffs, which is the plan, into the playoffs. So yeah, there aren't a lot of 34-year-old corners. Pat P did it for a number of years later in his career, still doing it to a certain extent. But he's not what he once was in Detroit, probably never was. In Detroit, he was with a bad team. He was in the conversation to be the best coverage corner in the NFL, to be honest. He's had a lot of success here. 3 of his Pro Bowls have been here. He's, got 150 pass deflections. This is a big time player to the point where if he finishes strongly, you're going to start to hear Hall of Fame talk. That's how good he's been as a corner. Yeah, he's one of those players. I don't know if it's because he's loud. Some people don't like him. He's a great teammate, team captain. As I mentioned, not everybody embraces younger players. More players in this league don't embrace younger. Yeah. Let's be honest, it's counterintuitive. They draft Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean to take his job.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to but those guys and help them. Yeah.
And he always goes back to when he was young in Detroit. Certain guys took him, certain guys took him under their wing, and he was grateful for that. And he feels it's his responsibility to do it for the young players here. And that's a good thing, man, especially with, Mitchell and DeJean and Ringo and Ricks and even Rodgers is a young corner. And and none of them are Darius Slay, and probably none of them ever will be. But to have somebody to tap in to like that is one of those intangibles that, yeah, something that we just talked about, you can't measure. So he's still their best corner. I don't think that's changing this year. He fixed the knee issue that he's been dealing with. He finally got the procedure, missed whatever it was, 5 games last year, came back for the playoffs. Great player. But yeah, he's getting older and it's not going to last forever. And he said, I mean, at this time next year, he might be gone, especially if Mitchell and DeJean develop the way they could. But for this year, he's their best corner. And I don't think that's changing.
We'll see how it all plays out. Good stuff from Johnny Mac breaking down the cornerbacks coming into the 2024 season. Just 5 days away, everybody, from training camp. John, you wrote an article. We're keeping it on the SI.com. So everybody go over to SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Read all of John's work and Ed Kratz. They both do a really, really good job covering this football team. They write exceptionally well, and obviously their coverage is free over there compared to some other outlets in Philly where you got to, John, it's like the subscription city now, man. I got to pay for everything. It's nice to go on SI and read all your guys' work without having to.
I'm sure it'll change, but for now,
yeah, probably will change. But anyway, you wrote about
those decisions are made at the corporate level, but for now, SI is keeping it free.
I'll take it for what we got right now, Johnny Mac. Anyway, you wrote an article on there yesterday, about 17 hours ago. The one statistic Kellen Moore must improve coming into the year. John, tell us about that statistic.
Jalen Hurts does not get rid of the football quickly, which he is understandable. One comparative when you're talking about some of those advanced numbers that we just talked about with Aaron, because of his style of play, and he's an off-schedule guy. And I always talk about you're going to see it with training camp starting. A lot of times he doesn't look that great in practice because they're blowing plays dead, and they're blowing plays dead that maybe he would get out of, extend the play, and make something happen. That's part of his game. That's his superpower, as Nick Sirianni stated. And you don't want to take that away from him. But I think there's a history here. If you go back to 2021, Jalen Hurts was bottom of the league. And then you go to his MVP level season of 2022, where he's second to Patrick Mahomes. He was down to 2.46 seconds to throw, which was, 14th, middle of the pack. And last year, he went down to 2.91 again, which is the only guy worse was Justin Fields. And that ain't good.
How much do you put on the coordinator, John, with that?
What's that?
How much do you put on the coordinator? I know it's obviously Jalen Hurts who's holding on to the ball, but Jalen just seemed, from my perspective, to know he knew where he wanted to go with the ball when Shane Steichen was calling the plays here in Philly.
Well, that's the thing. That's the coaching part. The coaching part, and I tried to make this clear. It's not, Doug Nussmeier's mentioned 2.3 seconds as, a sort of a benchmark. And that's for quarterbacks like Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier. That's not for quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts. So it's never going to be that number, but it's got to be better. It's got to be back down near 2.46 like it was in 2022. And, the answer to that is not just, all right, where we've talked about ad nauseum, just dump it off to the back, forcing him to throw it in underneath, or drilling it into his head. All right, 2.3 seconds, ball's got to be out. That'll fix it from just that number standpoint, but it needs to be organic improvement, not mandated, which is what I wrote. It needs to be Jalen Hurts' evolution. And that's when you say, yes, most of this is on Jalen Hurts, but how do you get a quarterback more comfortable, that's where the teaching part of it comes in. So you need to get him more comfortable that this is going on. This is where the ball goes. And he needs to trust what he sees, and he needs to get the football out quickly. Not just get it out quickly to get it out quickly sake. Again, it's got to be because you don't want to take away you don't want to take away the superpower. So it's about teaching. It's about, and that's the most important part of coaching. All people talk about X's and O's. That's bullshit. Motion. That's eyewash. That's what Jim calls it, Jim Schwartz. That's what he literally calls it. That's eyewash. That's all that is. Coaching is teaching. The more comfortable he is, the more confident he is in understanding what he's seeing, will speed it up and we'll get him back to that. That's what he needs to fix, but it's easier said than done.
Definitely easier said than done. And I do wonder how much of that falls on, not the coaching in terms of, is Jalen just not processing fast enough last year? Is there an element of that involved? But when you look at 22, he was processing faster. So that's where, the wrench is kind of thrown in with Kellen Moore, where he's going to have to create a situation where Jalen, as you mentioned, is comfortable, confident, and is processing the field, very quickly.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about understanding, and that's what Tom was talking about, Tom Brady, with the viral clip that I always mention now, because he's literally telling these young guys how to play the quarterback position. And how to play the quarterback position is to get your team in the best play possible every single play, time and time again, in a consistent fashion. And how do you do that? It becomes second nature. You talked about continuity as well. Not only continuity on the coaching staff, but continuity with players. As players are together longer, they get better and better because they know how each feels.
Yeah,
it's about being comfortable. It's about teaching. And that's the difficult part of Kellen Moore's job. And it's going to be difficult.
We'll see how he does. Let's get to our commercial break. Johnny Mac. Burman's not in our green room yet, but I'm expecting him to be here. I did coordinate with him this morning, said he will be here for 9:20. So let's get to our commercial break. Zack Burman from PHLY, great Eagles beat reporter. If you don't know him, you should know him. You'll know him after the interview coming up. Does a great job for PHLY Sports. So we will talk to Zack Burman coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Zack Burman from PHLY. Zack, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you, Zack. You excited? What number is this for you?
I can't wait. This is year 13 covering the Eagles, year 15 covering the NFL, and I still get the same excitement as year one.
Nice. I know. I call Zack the Brandon Graham of the beat reporters. He sets the temperature for us. He's the thermometer. He's not. What does it say? The same.
Be the thermometer, not the thermostat. Actually, so that expression I heard from the first time from Mark Sanchez. Mark Sanchez was telling me what it takes to be a quarterback, and he said you have to be the thermometer. You have to be the thermostat, not the thermometer, right? You have to set the temperature as opposed to taking.
And that's what Brandon does for the Eagles. That's what Zack does for us. So it'll be good to see you. I wanted to get you on for two reasons. One, I always love talking Eagles with you, but two, Zack's got a new book coming out in September at the start of the season, The Franchise, the Philadelphia Eagles, a curated history of the Eagles. So go pre-order that on Amazon. I assume they can do that now, Zack. Can they? Is it already up?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's up on Amazon, wherever you get your books. It comes out September 24th, and it's a curated history of the last 25 years of the Eagles. So from the Andy Reid era to present day, 1999 to present
That's the glory days. Let's be honest. That's
exactly. Yeah, and so it's a combination of new reporting from my time on the beat, extensive research. It's not an encyclopedia, right? So it doesn't cover everything during that period, but it highlights the players, the coaches, the executives, the moments, right? I think I have some good perspective in there from some of the key people in the organization during that time. And Malcolm Jenkins, I was fortunate enough, Malcolm wrote the foreword to the book. So that comes out September 24th. And as we get closer, there's really some neat anecdotes and details in there, some of which haven't been out before that I'm excited to share.
And I am excited to read it. And Zack is now at PHLY, so I should mention that, the PHLY Eagles podcast. We beat you at Aaron Shots this morning, by the way. We had Aaron on, but
is that okay? All right, I got to listen back and make sure I don't repeat.
But very cool. So I'm looking forward to it. And basically, you're talking about the curated history of the Jeffrey Lurie era, which, as I mentioned, has been the glory days, and that's where I think it all starts this season. Zack, is the fact that look, that's a difficult decision coming off that collapse for Jeffrey Lurie. From my perspective, and I want to get your perspective, I think he struck the fence a little bit. And this is going to be the interesting story of how Nick Sirianni handing off an offense that that he was very, whatever adjective you want to use, he liked his offense. Sure. And I think he was proactive. He saw the writing on the wall, and he understood he had to make some changes. But that's a very delicate balance. Where are you on that ship, Zack?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that is one of the key storylines for this season. I think it was a necessary one. I think that for Nick to come back, there needed to be a different voice with the offense. And certainly Kellen Moore brings those types of credentials that he's experienced, he's called plays. There is a change there. Now, to your point, Nick Sirianni, one thing he's told both of us in the past that there's kind of nothing he enjoys more than putting a game plan together, right? And he's not the one putting that game plan together. So I think there tends to be, and understandably so, a lot of focus on play calling. But the way Nick has often made the distinction to us is essentially the play caller's he's picking the items off the menu, whereas the person putting the game plan together is assembling the menu. And Nick has always assembled the menu. And now it's Kellen Moore doing that. But I do think for Nick to be back this year, there needed to be some type of change. And then the other thing I would add too, and it speaks to Jeffrey Lurie, it speaks to Nick Sirianni, is I think that if things don't go well this year, I don't believe Howie Roseman is the one who's going to be held responsible. I think they feel like this roster is ready-made for success. I don't think Jalen Hurts would be. I think there's an investment there that they want to see it out. I think this is really, it's cut and dry. Nick needs to win to be coaching his 5th year with the Eagles.
Yeah.
Zach, we haven't had you on all offseason. What do you think of the 2 coordinators they brought in? Obviously, a lot was made about the guys they had last year. It didn't obviously go well down the stretch. They go the experienced route this year. What do you think of the 2 coordinators they brought in for Nick Sirianni's staff?
Yeah, in a vacuum, I obviously like them both. In that Vic Fangio brings considerable experience. He's as John has said often, right? He's the one who, like other D coordinators, try to mimic and they try to take from that scheme. So now you get the originator of it. But I think one thing in that building in particular, they think a lot's made of like the scheme. They say I think what they're particularly excited for is the game plans, is the week-to-week game plans that Vic Fangio has, the preparation experience he has with there. And I think with Vic Fangio, really, if you look at the historical context, you're not hiring a top of the league defense. What you're hiring is a high baseline, right? And with the way the Eagles are constructed, I think what their expectation is that the offense is elite and the defense can't be bad, right? So if with Vic Fangio, if you raise that baseline and you combine it with the offense, then you should get what they want. With Kellen Moore, I think what you're getting is someone who first off, the Eagles have been high on him for quite some time. I know they liked him quite a bit in 2021 when they hired Nick Sirianni. They brought him in here. But you have someone who has playing experience, has significant coordinator experience, and has worked with different types of quarterbacks, and has worked in different systems, and is a good play caller. So I like the hires in a vacuum. Now, the reason I say in a vacuum is you have to see how it comes to fruition. And there's a lot of credentialed people in that building. And when you have a lot of credentialed people in the building, it's often everyone kind of wants to have their hands on it. So I am curious to see what it looks like in the end. When you hear the term collaboration, I think it's good in practice. I think it's good in theory, but in practice, someone's finger is always on the button.
Yeah. What did you make of Jalen Hurts at the end of the spring? And I think it was overhyped, but I think he could have handled it better when he was asked about Nick Sirianni. I think it was a layup and he missed a layup, basically. But I will say I sensed a little bit of frustration. If you go back in Jalen's career to Alabama, it started with Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian year 1. It's been constant change year in and year out, except for a year and a half with Shane Steichen. And that happened to be his best year, the second time, when you had a little bit of continuity. You heard the 95% number. I think that's more about terminology than the actual offense. Did you sense frustration? I sense frustration, a little bit of frustration with the constant change that Jalen's had to endure.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if it's from that. I don't know if it's not. I agree with you that he missed a layup. I don't think it had as much to do with Sirianni though as it did with like the media. I think that and you know this well. I think Jalen's instinct is like not to go along with your storyline, not to go along with your narrative, and sometimes he does that in such a way that it becomes like counterproductive publicly. And I think in that situation, it was counterproductive publicly because he took an easy question on the last day. It could be a throwaway answer. He could get on with the summer. The team could get on with the summer, and it turned into something else. Now, the one thing I will say with Jalen, and I'm not afraid to say this, is that there is a pattern here of times when he hasn't necessarily had his coach's back publicly. You think back to the Seattle game last year. You think back to the playoff game last year, right? Now, again, this could be Jalen's impulse. Like, I don't need to help the media out. Like, he kind of has his way of doing things. But I do know there was a sentiment after that Seattle game last year, kind of behind the scenes, that Jalen could have done what AJ did. Jalen could have said, "No, that was on me. I threw the interception. Like, that's not on the coach. That wasn't the play call there. There was
Zach, I bring that up all the time because I'm like, the old adage in this league, for quarterbacks and coaches, if there's success, it's we. If there's failure, it's me. You got to step up and take responsibility, as AJ did.
Exactly.
And AJ said, Nick, looked like a fool for us.
Yeah.
Basically was his term. And Jalen to this day has never. So I'm with you 100% on that one.
And then the Tampa game, even if he did not know that this idea that Nick Sirianni was kind of coaching for his job, or that could be on the hot seat, like, the easy answer there is, I want my coach back, right? Like, Nick should be the coach. My point is, and I do think this is kind of how, like I said, Jalen's conditioned with the media, the rat poison component of it. But look, you can't control the questions, you can't control the answers. And when you're in that setting, you can have your coaches back, you can have your teams back, and I think that there's so I don't think that it was a rift or something of that nature. But I do think Jalen should be cognizant that when he's up there, he's the face of the franchise, and what you say matters.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Zach, I think Jalen is intentional enough to know those things. I mean, you bring up the rat poison. You don't want to dismiss one set of rat poison to create a whole nother set of rat poison. And in a way, he did that. And part of me thinks he knew what he was doing. Maybe not, but let's talk about Jalen.
I call it an unforced error. That's what I called it. It was easy. It said, he's doing a great job.
Yeah.
That's it. Boom. That it could be as simple as that. It was an unforced error. And it's not surprising that members of the Eagles organization were disappointed because, as you pointed, Zach, it was about the timing.
Yeah.
Everybody's gone. So you got this 6-7 week vacuum of speculation.
Yeah, and this story is about to come back up when you guys talk to him next week in the media, and he's going to be asked about it. Obviously, let's be real. And he'll either quiet it or he will create more storylines out of it. Zach, let's talk about Jalen on the field. A lot was made of his, I guess you could call it a regression last year. Obviously, didn't play the MVP form. They sputtered down the stretch and went 1-6. You think Kellen Moore's the right guy to get Jalen Hurts back to form this year in 2024?
I think Jalen Hurts is the right guy to get Jalen Hurts back to form. I think Jalen is an outstanding quarterback. We have seen that before. I think if last year's the regression, if last year is the down year, that's a fine down year. I think Jalen can play better. I think Jalen will play better. But on the list of concerns that I would have about the Eagles, I don't think Jalen Hurts is like especially high on that list. And it is, I agree with you, Zander. It's incumbent upon Kellen Moore to maximize Jalen Hurts, but I don't think it takes much to maximize Jalen Hurts, because I think Jalen Hurts has the tools there. He has the personnel around him. And as long as he's healthy, I'm expecting Jalen Hurts to have a good season.
In a lot of ways, Zach, I always say, for all the talk about how bad the Eagles offense, was, and everybody was bad late in the season, I think if you regress to the mean from a turnover standpoint, it's the same offense, basically.
Yeah, you're right. I think the turnovers, the regress to the mean component there, you're absolutely right. I think they were exceptional at limiting turnovers
Situational
2 years
football.
ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
2 years ago. And then last year, you saw more turnovers. And I don't mean to keep bringing up 2017, but like in 2017, for instance, they were exceptional on third downs and in the red zone. And then when there's a slight regression on third downs and in the red zone, it changes so much with the offense. So if Jalen can find if Jalen's turnovers can be somewhere between where they were in 2022 and where they were in 2023, it makes a significant difference in terms of points per game, in terms of wins and losses.
Where are you in the? I constantly hear Jalen's got to be under center more, or Jalen's got to get the ball out of his hands more. He's got to dump it off to the backs more. He's got to get the backs involved. And I'm kind of the sentiment that's not him as a quarterback. Like I don't want to turn him into something he's not. What I did see, I think the most alarming statistic with Jalen Hurts is his time to throw was, Justin Fields like last year. In 2022 is about middle of the road. So that he's never going to be top 5. He's never going to be Brock Purdy. He's never going to be the point guard, nor do you want him to be. But you need him to get back to that 2022 level. Is that about just being uncomfortable? Is that about teaching? Is that on Jalen? Because I think if you mandate it, and you heard that number, what was Doug? Doug Nussmeier gave us, I think it was
2.3.
2.3 seconds.
Yeah.
Like he's not getting to 2.3 seconds, nor should he. But when you hear that, are you at least a little bit concerned that they're going to try to, get the fix from a statistical standpoint instead of an organic standpoint? So, in other words, I think Jalen has to learn that on his own versus being, you got to get the ball out in 2.4 seconds.
Yeah, I think what Jalen sees on a play-by-play basis, on a drive-by-drive basis, is critical here. I think back to the beginning of last year. There was a stretch where the one thing you kept hearing was unscouted looks, right? And I think that this is all part of playing a quarterback. It's all part of playing quarterback. You're going to get unscouted looks. I think when I look at the end of the year with the way the Eagles handled the blitz, I don't think Jason Kelce in year 13 didn't know how to pick up a blitz, right? So I think that,
or they don't have hot routes, Zach.
Exactly.
That drove me insane.
I think a lot of it goes back to the quarterback there, and that's I don't mean that as a form of criticism. Like this is the reality of playing the position. Is that when you're exceptional, okay, it looks exceptional, and when you're not exceptional, it looks problematic. So Jalen needs to. I think what he sees on a play-by-play basis and a drive-by-drive basis is critical here. And he's a smart guy who's seen a lot of football. I keep thinking back to the Doug Peterson expression and Frank Reich, that you build that database, right? So now you're in year 3 as the starting quarterback, or I'm sorry, year 4 as the starting quarterback. Yeah. You've seen the counter punches a few times. What's your counterpunch to their counterpunch? And I think that's going to be a big part this year.
Zach, a lot's been made of the defense moving off of Jalen Hurts now, going into the defensive side of the football. Not as talented or deep of a roster on defense. A lot of young talent, a lot of potential, I think, on defense coming into the year. But what do you, when you view the defense, what's the biggest concern for you coming into the year?
Yeah, the biggest concern I would say is they need to have a consistent pass rush, and they traded away their best pass rusher. And Bryce Huff is a good player, or he has upside. Had a double-digit sack season last year, but Bryce Huff doesn't come. He doesn't give me the same comfort level that Hassan Reddick did. Right? Fletcher Cox was a consistent player for them last year. They let Fletcher Cox go. I'm sorry. Fletcher Cox retired rather, and now you have Jalen Carter stepping in, and I think Jalen Carter can be a top of the league player. He needs to do it on a consistent basis. Nolan Smith needs to play like a first-round pick, right? I think that it all starts. It sounds simplistic, but you protect the quarterback on offense, you pressure the quarterback on defense, good things happen, right? Yeah. And they need to pressure the quarterback on defense. That's going to be the key. For all the attention that we might pay to linebackers or safeties, it starts with a consistent pass rush, and I think that's a question going into the year is, are you going to get a consistent pass rush?
Yeah. And I'm really high on Bryce Huff. I mean, his pressure percentages are outrageous. Top of the league last 2 years, not even just 1 year. But he's got to prove he can do it and be a full-time player. With the Jets, Zach, he was just a one-trick pony. Now he's going to be asked to, you got to support the run, you got to be a flat defender, and you got to rush the passer. But I am very high on him. You've heard Howie throw out hope is not a strategy a couple times over the years. Well, and a cynic might say it is a linebacker. You're just crossing your fingers. You just pointed out, and I'm with you. It should be a devalued position. It's not as important as the things you've stated. But the Eagles taking it too far at linebacker. I mean, I see a lot of cross fingers with Devin White and Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean's health, to the point where I'm starting to think, hey, maybe Ben Sumrin can turn into something because he's a great athlete. Have the Eagles taken it too far at linebacker?
I don't think so. And I actually think they're better positioned going into camp this year than they were a year ago. Now you're right. There are question marks. Devin White has been a high-level player in his career. He was not a high-level player last year. That's why Tampa let him go. The Eagles made as significant of a financial investment in him as they've made since Nigel Bradham. Now, that's not saying much, right? They haven't invested in this position, but I think there is a degree of optimism in Devin White, and they were never going to get into the Patrick Queen market or even like the Jordan Brooks market when you look at what it took to get those guys. With Nakobe Dean, that there was significant draft pick investment there, right? A third round pick. He was their highest drafted linebacker since Michael Kendricks. And I think last year what they did is they cleared the deck, okay, for Nakobe Dean to be the top guy. When Nakobe Dean went down week 1 against the Patriots, that affected them quite a bit. I think they have a little more depth there. Oren Burks was a top backup last year for San Francisco, who has outstanding linebackers. Oren Burks played in the Super Bowl, right? If Oren Burks is your backup linebacker, that's a fine situation. I would say. We'll continue to see what happens with Jeremiah Trotter, like Ben Van Sumerin's development. But I think if your top 3 is Devin White, Nakobe Dean, and Oren Burks, that would give me a little bit more comfort than what they had a year ago going into it. But it's not San Francisco's linebackers, it's not Pittsburgh's linebackers, it's not Baltimore's linebackers, and but that's not the way the Eagles are constructed either. I don't think they've taken it too far to answer your question. I just think that they're relying on bets, and you need one of your bets to hit.
With Devin, sorry, Zander, just a quick follow up. With Devin, if it is Devin and Nakobe, who's the Mike there? Who do you think the Mike is going to be? Who's the green dot?
Yeah, based on my understanding from the spring, it will be Devin White. That Devin White's going to be staying on the field, right? Now, Nakobe Dean is a part of what you love or what you like about him is like the personality, the leadership component of it. But I do think going into the year, my understanding is that Devin White is going to be the dime linebacker. Devin White's going to be the 3-down backer.
Let's go cornerback, Zach. Me and Johnny Mac talked about it a little bit earlier in the show today. 14 deep they are. Now, they're not going to keep everybody, but
15, depending how you do it.
15, right? I mean, it's a deep position right now. How do you view it coming into the year? They got a lot of young guys, a lot of unproven, but a lot of guys that have a high upside. Yeah. How do you view the cornerback position panning out when September 6th gets here?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's like the opposite of wide receiver, where like wide receiver, you're top heavy, the envy of the league with your starters, but you have questions about your depth. At corner, the Eagles have more depth going into training camp than any time I've covered the team, in these 13 years. They are, there were times last year going into camp where you said, well, if Slay goes down or Bradbury goes down, who's stepping in? This year, I think you'd be comfortable with your second team corners as starters. And they've obviously invested in the position. How I see it shaking out come September is I think the versatility of some of these guys is going to be important in the roster math. I think they can go lighter at safety It's because you can you can play Cooper DeJean at safety. You can play Avonte Maddox at safety if Maddox is on the team. I think the key is going to be who starts opposite Slay. If they had their way, I think it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell. I'm expecting it to be Quinyon Mitchell. The thing is if Quinyon Mitchell's not the starter, I think it's because Kelee Ringo looked outstanding during training camp. And I think there is reason to be optimistic about Kelee Ringo. I know Isaiah Rodgers has become kind of like a fan sensation here. I think Rodgers has upside. I don't think it'd be good for the organization if Rodgers is your starter week 1, because that likely means Quinyon Mitchell or Kelee Ringo didn't show you enough to start.
Yeah. And I mentioned that earlier in the show, Zach. And make sure you follow Zach on X, Twitter, at ZBurm. You can read him at all PHLY.com. I'll listen to him there every day with Bo Wolf as well. Their PHLY Eagles podcast. And the book is coming out in September. So we'll get to that again before you leave. But I'm with you. I go back to Jim Schwartz, and Jim, I love that term he coined, startup costs. Mm-hmm. Get them over with. You drafted Quinyon Mitchell for a reason. You remember a couple of years ago, Kansas City did it with Steve Spagnuolo. They had all those young corners. They didn't look great early in the season, but by the time they had to make a run, all of a sudden they look better and better. I'm with you. You got to get Quinyon on the field, throw him into the deep end of the pool. Cooper DeJean as well. And maybe by the second half of the season, Zach, you really start cooking with gas. I think that's the way they got to go about it.
Yeah, and to your point there, I think that's one thing that Howie's really pushing for there. I think Howie thought they could have played some of their younger guys more last year. He suggested that at the combine, right? That him and Nick talked about it. Like, Nolan Smith, when they cut Derek Barnett, I think their hope was that Nolan Smith would take on a bigger role. Now, you could say that Nolan Smith's got to earn it, right? But there were times last year, for instance, when they were playing Justin Evans at safety, when you could have had Sidney Brown out there. We can go on down the list for different spots they could do, even on offense. There were times when Sua Opeta was in there when it could have been Tyler Steen. It's the coach's job to think, like, think, how do you win the next game? And that's why you pay the coaches. But there is this idea that you got to take your lumps with some of these young guys because the payoff is going to be higher, and you wanted that payoff to come in January and February.
Yeah. Last one for me, Zach, on the football side of things. How good can this team be this year? Do you view them as a Super Bowl contender coming into the year?
They need to be a Super Bowl contender with the way they're constructed, with the investments that they've made financially, with kind of what this window is. You look at the Vegas over-under, they're top 10 in Super Bowl odds too. This is a team that if they're not playing in, one of the last 3-4 weekends of the year, it'll be a disappointment. And I think it's going to be a disappointment to Jeffrey Lurie. His quote when he spoke in March was, all the ingredients are there. And I think that's the way they view it. You don't sign Saquon Barkley to, $13+ million a year if you don't think this team can win right away. You don't make some of the investments that they've made if you don't think this team can win right away. So they make some moves for down the line thinking, but they absolutely think their window is now, and it should be now.
Yep. And it's exciting time, as it always is, when you have a potential contender. Training camp set to begin next week. Follow Zach's coverage at PHLY, as we mentioned. And the book, September 24th is the day. So be on the lookout. Amazon.com, your favorite bookstore, the franchise, the Philadelphia Eagles, a curated history of the Eagles pretty much through the Jeffrey Lurie era. And Zach has been there for most of it. Nobody knows more about this team than him. Malcolm Jenkins with the forward. Anything else I missed, Zach?
Nah, that's a great plug. I need you as a spokesperson. I will. I'm having a bunch of book signings around the Philly area.
There we go.
I'm at every game. So yeah, if you get a copy, I'm happy to put my name on it. And then you know, as we get closer, there's some details from the book that I'm excited to share.
Zach, I want to ask you one question about the book before I let you out of here. For anybody who doesn't know, Zach also wrote Underdogs, the Philadelphia Eagles' emotional road to Super Bowl victory, all about the Eagles Super Bowl. That book was tremendous. So I'm very excited to read your next book. Can you give us one tidbit, Zach, of what was your favorite thing to write about in this new book that you have coming out, whether it was a topic, a certain year, a certain moment? Give us some anticipation, some excitement for what we might read about that we'll enjoy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My favorite part was really broadening the lens on the Jeffrey Lurie era. So much of my coverage of Jeffrey is like with a narrow lens to what that season is, or to a particular decision, or even like you go into a Super Bowl, the critical factors that led to the Super Bowl. And I spent a lot of time, you know, or a decent amount of time talking to Jeffrey and broadening that lens to try to get a sense of like, what are the critical factors when you look at these 25 years? What established the foundation for this? What were the big decisions along the way? And I think that it was really constructive of me, not just in writing this book, but in covering the team, because it really gave me an understanding of some of the big picture thinking that went into a lot of the things we like there are decisions that they make today that have, you know, that you can trace back the stuff they did under Andy Reid and some of the things they did in, you know, the mid 2000s. And speaking to Joe Banner for this too, you see a lot of different things, like, you know, when you talk about their cap strategy, things they were doing back then and why they were doing it that go into effect here. So I think being able to broaden that lens was the best part of this book.
Yeah, Joe doesn't get enough credit for the cap stuff, and you can just ask him that, Zach.
He will in this book. I promise you that. So,
but he deserves it. Zack Burman, the great Zack Burman. The book, September 24th. You'll be sick of me soon enough, Zach, but I'm looking forward to seeing you next week as we gear up for another season.
I can't wait. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks, Zach. There's Zack Burman joining us on Birds 365. Great stuff from Zach. We'll be following his work all through the offseason and into the NFL season. Good stuff from Zack Burman. John, I like his perspective. He is I will say about Zach, he's a pretty optimistic guy for a beat reporter.
Oh yeah, he's hot. He's Mr. Energy. He's Mr. Positivity. Yeah. So no question about it. I mean, one of the things in the book I can tell you is he's got Jeffrey Lurie's original sort of checklist to build in a successful team and organization. So a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, as I mentioned, his first book was tremendous too. You know, the Underdogs book about the Eagles Super Bowl run.
And I would say most of what the Eagles do is trace back to Andy Reid and Joe Banner, to be honest, to be fair. Most of what they do was built by those two guys.
Yeah, in a way, they taught Jeffrey Lurie what he needed to do to build a successful organization, right?
Yeah, and you know, Joe taught Howie sort of that part of it. So, and you know, we know about Andy Reid. I mean, one of the greatest coaches of all time. Now, there's no conversation about it. So, the Eagles had that for what? 99 to 2012. So, you know, they didn't get over the top, and I know that's a disappointment, but boy, those were some great days and completely changed the Eagles' reputation around the NFL from being to being one of the standards. Jeffrey sort of overstated maybe with the gold standard, but certainly one of the standards. And they've been that for a quarter century. So younger fans are a little bit spoiled. They don't know that this team wasn't always relevant.
Yeah, this team has been relevant certainly since I've been a fan. I'm obviously on the younger side of things when you factor in the kind of guests we have and the people we talk to. But definitely not a time to be taken for granted. Obviously, Jeffrey Lurie's done a pretty good job owning this team. We are always in contention. Maybe you could argue we wish we had a couple more Super Bowls here and there. But look, it's the NFL. It's tough to win in this league, and that's part of what makes Super Bowls so great. Johnny Mac, good show today, man. I thought we covered a lot of good topics. Camp is right around the corner, man. I can almost taste it. It's right there.
Yeah, it's getting close. What's today? Thursday?
Yeah. 5 days, man, until you're down there.
Yeah, it's getting close. And then when things start, it doesn't stop. And hopefully till February for the fans' sake.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all plays out. Good stuff today. We had Aaron Schatz on in hour number 1. For anybody that missed him, we had some mixed reviews on him in the chat because he was very analytic based. Look, I get it. I get why people don't like analytics, but there certainly is a place for it in the game. There's a place if you understand how to contextualize it and use it. And I thought Aaron did a good job laying out, where his analytics, why they matter and why they're important. So good stuff from him. And then we had Zack Burman in hour number 2, who I thought was great. Johnny Mac, good show today, man. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the week, and then we'll get into the weekend. And all of a sudden, it'll be camp week, man. We'll be right there and ready to go off and running.
Yeah. Starting to be imposing. Yeah.
Any final thoughts for us, Johnny Mac, on this Thursday?
Cornerback position is what we focused in on. Zach and I are sort of on the same page. If it's not Quinyon Mitchell, it's probably not a good thing week 1 against the Packers. That's what the Eagles want it to be. That's what they need it to be. Now, if he shows up in the summer and doesn't perform well, I think it could change, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, I expect Quinyon Mitchell to be that day 1 starter.
Yeah, interesting. I thought what Zach said about Jalen Hurts was interesting too. He seems to have no doubts about Jalen Hurts, which is interesting to me. I mean, I'm a big fan of the player. I've been watching him since I was a freshman in Alabama. I've obviously told that story when I was down there in Jerry's world, Jalen's first game ever in college. And they absolutely throttled the USC Trojans 52-6, I think it was. So I've been a fan of him for a while, but I will say I definitely have some things I'm watching, definitely some concerns coming into the year with him, and Zach kind of quieted them all.
Yeah, my concerns have more to do with people trying to change him into something he isn't.
Yeah.
Other than trying to accentuate what he is, because he's a very good player, but he's a unique player. And the Eagles, Nick has used that adjective. Jalen has used that adjective to describe himself. And, unique is unique. It doesn't mean turn him into non-unique. That's my biggest concern.
Absolutely. Johnny Mac, we'll get out of here. Barb's asking, can we get Ray Didinger on the show? I would actually love to get Ray.
We've had Ray on the show.
We've had Ray on, but we haven't had him on since I've been on. Barbara, it's funny. I'm actually one of the people. I don't know how many people have it, but Ray is a home phone guy still. He's not a cell phone guy. Ray has a home phone. I have the number. You call it. Normally his wife, who's a very nice lady, picks up. She'll connect you with Ray. So I'll make that call eventually here. Hopefully we can get Ray up as we get a little bit closer to the season. Good suggestion from you. I'd love to talk to Hall of Fame Ray Didinger. So we'll do that. Johnny Mac, good show today, man. We'll talk to you tomorrow. All right, brother?
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Make sure you guys hit the like button on your way out, and we will talk to you tomorrow on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.